This is the Louie T Network.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the 2018 NFL Coaching Carousel here on the Louie T Network. I, of course, am your man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me on this program. Without a doubt, the most shocking revelation of Black Monday and the day afterwards or 2 days afterwards, whenever this took place, I think it was Tuesday, was the news out of Cincinnati. Guess who's back in the mother effing house for 2 more years in your mother effing mouth? Of course, talking about none other than the Marvin Lewis for the second straight year. Reports have surfaced that Marvin Lewis was done in Cincinnati. Last year it was he was going to retire. This year it was that mutual parting of ways. He wants a front office job or he's going to coach somewhere else. It was all but a foregone conclusion that this was it. His contract had not been renewed and he was a lame duck coach and nothing really had to take place other than we're not going to re-sign you. You're free to go. Pack your shit, get out. No, Marvin Lewis, and look, after the ass whooping at home to Chicago, who can sit here with a straight face and tell me that it didn't seem like an inevitable transaction that Marvin Lewis was out of? Gone. And then a win against the Lions to end their season, and a win against the Ravens on the road to end their season, and all of a sudden, Marv is back. What seemed like the fellas just winning one for old Marv on the way out turned into 2 more years of Marvin Lewis. He won't die. And I'll tell you what, though, on a serious note, Marvin Lewis, I think, is a really good coach. Second longest tenured coach in the league behind Bill Belichick. He gets results out of his players. This team competes every single week. They're good every single year. They've got Kirk Cousins light on their roster, and as long as he's there, they're going to compete. They're never going to be great with Kirk Cousins light. Of course, I'm talking about Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle. But they're going to compete. And when Andy's at his best, we saw that in 2015, this team has a chance to be really good. Defense has to be good. Special teams has to be good. And Andy needs to be good. He was good. He was great in 2015 before the injury. But nonetheless, I don't know if Marvin Lewis can get this team over the hump. I liken it to Tony Dungy in Indianapolis. Sometimes you just need someone else to come in and finish what you started. It was great that you got us here, and we appreciate all that you've done, but somebody else has to come in. And Tony pretty much put that Buccaneers franchise in a position that they were ready to win. He just couldn't get them over the hump. Now, that was a little different than this because at least Tony could win playoff games. He just couldn't win the big playoff game. But nonetheless, he was getting them there just about every year. Same can be said for Marvin Lewis. If they're not in the playoffs, they're damn close. They don't have poor seasons in Cincinnati. As bad as it gets is usually 6-10, 7-9 at worst. But you're generally looking at an 8-8, 9-7, 10-6, 11-5 football team. And so, look, we can make fun of Marvin Lewis. We can talk about how the team is undisciplined and they've got a bunch of guys that are unruly, yada, yada, yada. You know the same old rhetoric that we spew all the time. I'm included. I can't sit here and point the finger as if I don't carry on that narrative, which it does have some life and some legs to it and some truth and validity to it. But it's also been an exaggeration and blown out of proportion to an extent. It doesn't matter. you give him any player from Vontez Burfict to Alex Erickson, and he's going to get the most out of him. That's been the MO of Marvin Lewis. Now, I myself was ready for change. I was ready to see the Bengals go out and get some fresh blood. Now, fresh blood for the Bengals means promoting from within or getting someone that's a part of the family. You heard the report of Jay Gruden. If he were available, they'd love to have him back. I'm pretty sure if Hugh Jackson got canned in Cleveland, they would have loved to have had Hugh back in Cincinnati. But they don't really go outside of their little circle. They've got a little bubble. It's almost as if they've got their own world out in Cincinnati. And if you're not a part of that community, then you don't get the respect of that organization. And they've done a great job of churning out coaches that have gone on to become NFL head coaches, Zimmer, Gruden, Jackson. However, I don't know how they feel about their defensive coordinator, Paul Guenther. He would have been the next one in line to get the job. I don't know if they love him, and as a head coach, speaking of which, they love him as a defensive coordinator, or else he'd be on the Redskins staff, because the Redskins asked for permission to interview Paul Guenther, to which the Cincinnati Bengals said no. So they like him enough as a coordinator, and I don't know if they loved him enough to give him the head coaching job. But that being said, Marvin Lewis is back. That 2-game winning streak, and it's funny, I sat down and I analyzed, because I've heard so many people talk about tanking, and I hate that phrase and what it stands for and represents. And I heard so many people talk about meaningless football games. And it may be meaningless to you as a fan, but to these coaches who have families, and to these coaches and players who spend all week game planning trying to win, there's no such thing as a meaningless game. And to me, looking at Vance Joseph and the way he was able to finish up, looking at Marvin Lewis and the way he was able to finish up, looking at the way that Jim Caldwell didn't finish up, these were guys that lost or kept their jobs because of the way the season finished up. And look, you say what you want, but those last 2 victories against teams that had everything to play for, the playoffs were on the line in 2 consecutive weeks. The Bengals, who were long ousted from any kind of playoff contention, to go out and win against Detroit at home after being clobbered at home the week prior by the Bears, and then turn around and then go on the road and do the improbable versus the Baltimore Ravens and win and knock them from playoff contention, speaks volumes as to the way this team feels about Marvin Lewis, and the way the organization feels about Marvin Lewis by them rewarding him with a 2-year deal. Came out of left field. No one saw it coming. It was actually laughable, because I think most Cincinnati Bengals fans were ready to move on. Most NFL fans thought it was time to move on. And for them to give him the extension or a new 2-year deal, and he's going to do those 2 years. Mike Brown ain't about that life of giving out free money. He's going to do those 2 years. So unless Marvin Lewis decides to retire, Marvin Lewis is going to be in Cincinnati for the next 2 seasons. So, wow. What was just 1-1 for Ole Marv on the way out has now morphed into a 2-year deal. Only in Cincinnati, man. My goodness. Boy, Mike Brown doesn't like to fire coaches. Boy, he loves him some Marvin Lewis. Well, I guess they'll be 8-8, 9-7 next year again. But hey, it's better than the alternative, what the Cincinnati Bengals were before Marvin got there. But they're not the same franchise now, and that's the thing that sucks, is that there's something to be said for making a change for the sake of making a change, and making a change just because. It's time to make a change for the sake of making a change, because change is necessary in Cincinnati. Not just because you want to see change be made. Don't be afraid of the unknown. Because Marvin Lewis has put you in a position to at least be in contention to make the postseason, if not make it over the last 7 to 10 years, doesn't mean you have to be afraid to spread your wings, fly away, and see what else is out there. I feel like this team is saying to themselves, and when I say this team, I'm really just meaning Mike Brown, is saying to himself, if it's not broken, I don't need to fix it. I could go out and hire some other coach and he not pan out, and I had Marvin here and I had a good thing, and I just don't want to rock the boat. These players play hard for him. He has the respect of these players. Why? I'll tell you why. Because you're not going to be anything other than mediocre with Marvin Lewis. That's why. Because you're not going to win a playoff game with Marvin Lewis. That's why. And in the AFC North, the way it's constructed, I don't know if you'll be able to even make the playoffs. Again, this is assuming the Steelers find a way to make the right decision at the quarterback position if Ben Roethlisberger were to retire. But Baltimore's not going away. Pittsburgh isn't going anywhere. And the Browns, believe it or not, and I know this sounds crazy, they're coming. They'll figure it out eventually. They're coming. So, I don't know, but guess who's back? Your man Marvin Lewis is back. Like cooked crack. You thought you got rid of him? No, you didn't. Good old Marv. Back in the saddle for another 2 years. 2-game winning streak equals 2 more years of Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati. Who would have thought? This one hit everyone like a sack of potatoes. In the face when you were least expecting it. This one came out of left field and caught everybody by surprise. Everyone except probably Cincinnati Bengals fans who were tired of Marvin Lewis 3 years ago and expected this to happen. But nonetheless, we'll see what happens with this Cincinnati Bengals organization. Marvin Lewis back in the saddle. He's done a good job of picking players, helping pick players. I can tell you that much. So I expect them to continue to draft well, but what does that mean? We'll see. In any event, I'm your man Louie T, signing off. Coaching Carousel. Much more to come. Don't go anywhere. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take care.